Ryan Carter was a simple man. He lived on the outskirts of town in a small house with a garage where he worked as a mechanic. His life was quiet, and that's how he liked it. But that night, something unusual happened. A sound. It wasn't the usual noise of crickets or the wind rustling the trees. It was something else, something alive. Ryan had been working late under his truck, tightening some bolts when he heard it. A soft, muffled sound. At first he thought it was his stray animal, a dog or maybe a raccoon, but as he listened closely, he realized it was a whimper. Someone was crying. He stood up, wiping grease off his hands. The sound was coming from the neighbor's backyard. His neighbor, Briggs, wasn't exactly a friendly man. He was the kind of person people avoided. No one asked him questions, and he liked it that way. Ryan hesitated. It wasn't his business, but something inside him refused to ignore the sound. Carefully, he walked towards the wooden fence separating their houses. He peeked through a small gap between the planks. The backyard was dark, but under the dim glow of a porch light, he saw something that made his stomach twist. A small broken-down doghouse, and inside it, a person. Ryan's eyes widened. It wasn't a dog. It was a girl. An alien girl. Her form was curled up inside the tiny space. Her arms were wrapped around her legs, and her skin, pale with a strange bluish tint, looked bruised. A thick metal collar was around her neck, attached to a chain that was bolted to the wooden walls of the doghouse. Ryan felt his chest tighten. This wasn't right. The girl's large golden eyes flickered toward him through the gap in the fence. She was scared. Ryan could see it in the way her thin fingers trembled, in the way she tried to make herself small, as if she had learned long ago that drawing attention meant pain. A wave of anger surged through him. Who would do this? He was about to step back when the porch door swung open. Briggs. The man walked out, yawning, scratching his beard. He didn't even look at the girl. He simply threw a plate on the ground near the doghouse, some leftover scraps of food, and muttered, "Eat if you want. Don't make noise." The girl flinched but didn't move. Briggs didn't care. He turned and walked back inside, slamming the door behind him. Ryan clenched his fists. His blood boiled. This wasn't just cruel, it was sickening. But what could he do? He wasn't some hero. Briggs was dangerous. He had connections, and people didn't mess with him. Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think. He couldn't act rashly. If he wanted to help her, he had to be smart. He looked at the girl one last time. Their eyes met. She didn't beg for help. She didn't reach out. She just watched him, silent and hopeless, as if she had already accepted her fate. Ryan made a decision. He wasn't going to leave her there. Not tonight. Not ever. Ryan lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of the alien girl locked in that doghouse wouldn't leave his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her thin arms, trembling body, and those golden eyes filled with quiet suffering. He knew the right thing to do was call the authorities, but this was Briggs they were dealing with. Briggs had power in this town. Cops wouldn't do anything. If they even showed up, they'd take one look, listen to Briggs' lies, and leave. Ryan exhaled sharply, sitting up. He had to do something. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped outside. The night was cold and silent, except for the distant hum of streetlights. He moved cautiously toward the wooden fence, pressing himself against it. The backyard was dark now, the porch light turned off. But the doghouse was still there. And so was she. She was sitting in the same curled-up position, her head resting on her knees, arms wrapped around herself for warmth. She didn't sleep. Maybe she was too afraid to close her eyes. Ryan's heart clenched. He tapped lightly on the fence to get her attention. The girl's ears twitched, and she slowly lifted her head. Her golden eyes locked onto his, wide and cautious. Ryan raised a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. She didn't move. Slowly, Ryan pointed at himself, then at the chain around her neck. Then he mimicked cutting it with his hands, hoping she would understand. The girl's eyes flickered with something new, hope. Just then, the porch light flickered on again. Ryan ducked down, pressing himself against the fence. Briggs stepped outside, grumbling. He looked toward the doghouse, his expression cold and uncaring. "Still awake," he muttered. The girl stiffened but didn't answer. Briggs sighed. "Suit yourself." He turned and went back inside, leaving the door slightly open. Ryan waited. His heart pounded. After a few minutes, the light went off again. The house was silent. Now was his chance. He climbed over the fence quickly but quietly, landing softly in the grass. The girl tensed, pressing herself against the back of the doghouse. She didn't trust him. Ryan held out his hands, showing he meant no harm. "Hey," he whispered. "I'm here to help you." The girl's breathing was shallow, her muscles tight as if expecting punishment. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread he had grabbed from his kitchen. He placed it in front of her and stepped back. She stared at it, then at him. Slowly, hesitantly, she picked it up. She didn't eat it immediately. Instead, she smelled it first, as if expecting it to be poisoned. Then she took the tiniest bite. Ryan saw her shoulders relax just a little. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. She just stared at him. "Can you understand me?" This time, she gave a small, hesitant nod. Ryan felt a surge of relief. At least they had some communication. He moved carefully, pulling a small wrench from his pocket and gesturing toward the chain attached to her collar. "I can take this off," he whispered. The girl froze. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded again. Ryan leaned in, gripping the chain where it was bolted to the wooden doghouse. The metal was rusted but strong. He placed the wrench around it and twisted, his muscles straining. The bolt wouldn't budge. Ryan cursed under his breath. He needed something stronger. The girl suddenly lifted a hand. Before Ryan could react, her fingers moved in a strange motion, and with a soft clicking sound, the metal snapped apart. Ryan blinked. "How did you?" The girl flinched as if expecting him to be angry. Ryan held up his hands. "Hey, it's okay." That was impressive. She hesitated, then rubbed her wrists where the chain had been. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs shook. Ryan caught her before she collapsed. "Easy," he murmured. "Let's get you out of here." He helped her toward the fence, but just as they reached it, a loud voice cut through the night. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Ryan turned. Briggs stood at the door, rage twisting his face. The girl tensed in fear. Ryan only had seconds to react. Run or fight. He grabbed the girl's hand and made a decision. Run. Ryan didn't think. He ran. With the alien girl's trembling hand in his, he sprinted toward the wooden fence, his heart pounding like a drum. Behind them, Briggs roared in anger. "Stop right there." Ryan knew Briggs wouldn't just let them go. He had to move fast. The girl stumbled, her legs still weak from being chained up for so long. Ryan tightened his grip on her wrist, pulling her forward. "You have to run," he urged. She looked at him, fear in her golden eyes. But then she nodded. She tried her best to keep up. Briggs cursed loudly and stormed toward them. "You think you can steal from me? She's mine." Ryan felt a surge of anger. "She's not yours, you monster." He reached the fence and boosted the girl up first. She hesitated, looking back. "Go," Ryan whispered urgently. She climbed awkwardly, her limbs shaking. Ryan caught her when she nearly slipped and pushed her up. Just as she tumbled over the other side, Ryan grabbed the top of the fence and hauled himself up. Too late. A strong hand yanked him down before he could jump. Briggs. The man was bigger, stronger, and furious. He grabbed Ryan by the collar and slammed him against the wooden fence. You made a big mistake, Briggs growled. You should have minded your own business. Ryan gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He didn't have time for this. The girl was on the other side, waiting. He had to get out. Briggs pulled back a fist, ready to punch, but Ryan ducked just in time. The fist slammed into the wooden fence instead, making Briggs grunt in pain. Ryan used the moment to kick Briggs in the stomach, making him stumble backward. Without wasting a second, Ryan jumped onto the fence again, gripping the top and swinging himself over. As soon as he landed on the other side, he grabbed the girl's hand and ran. "Get back here!" Briggs bellowed from behind, but Ryan didn't stop. They raced across the yard, cutting through the narrow alley between the houses. The girl's breathing was heavy, but she was running faster now. Ryan glanced back. Briggs wasn't following them anymore. He had probably gone back inside to grab a weapon or call his men. "We need to get out of here," Ryan said, leading her toward his truck parked near his garage. He opened the door and helped her inside, slamming it shut before running around to the driver's side. His hand shook as he started the engine. The truck roared to life. Just as he pulled out onto the road, Briggs ran out of his house, shouting. Ryan didn't care. He stepped on the gas and drove away. The road to freedom. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the truck's engine and the girl's uneven breathing. Ryan glanced at her. She was pressed against the seat, looking out the window as if expecting Briggs to appear at any moment. "You okay?" he asked. She turned to him, hesitant, then nodded slowly. Ryan let out a sigh of relief. "That was close," he muttered. "Too close." The girl's golden eyes studied him. "Why?" she asked softly. Ryan frowned. "Why what?" "Why help?" Ryan hesitated. He could have ignored her. He could have walked away. But something about seeing her locked up like that had made his blood boil. "You didn't deserve that," he said finally. "No one does." She stared at him, as if trying to understand his words. Then, for the first time, her expression softened. Ryan focused on the road ahead. They had to get somewhere safe. A temporary safe place. Ryan drove for nearly an hour before pulling into a quiet, abandoned cabin in the woods. It wasn't much, just an old place he had fixed up years ago when he wanted a getaway from town. No one knew about it, and that made it the perfect hiding spot. As he turned off the engine, he turned to the girl. "You'll be safe here," he said. She looked at the cabin, then back at him. She still seemed uncertain. Ryan stepped out of the truck and walked around to open her door. She flinched slightly, but when she saw his gentle expression, she hesitated, then took his offered hand. Inside, the cabin was small but warm. Ryan grabbed a blanket from the couch and handed it to her. She took it carefully, running her fingers over the fabric as if it was the softest thing she had ever touched. "You hungry?" Ryan asked. She nodded quickly. Ryan smiled a little. "All right, let me see what I can find." As he walked into the small kitchen, the girl sat on the couch, hugging the blanket around herself. For the first time, in who knows how long, she wasn't locked in a cage. For the first time, she was free. But deep down, Ryan knew this wasn't over. Briggs wouldn't forget this, and soon he would come looking. The cabin was silent, except for the soft crackling of the small heater Ryan had switched on. The air smelled of dust and old wood, but to the alien girl sitting on the couch, it must have felt like paradise compared to that dirty doghouse. She sat with her legs tucked under the thick blanket Ryan had given her, staring at the flickering light of a small lamp. Her golden eyes reflected the dim glow, filled with something that Ryan couldn't quite understand. For the past few minutes, neither of them had spoken. Ryan stood in the small kitchen, heating up a can of soup he had found in the cupboard. It wasn't much, but it was better than what she had before. As he stirred the pot, he glanced toward the couch. She was watching him. Not in fear, at least not as much as before, but there was curiosity in her gaze now, as if she were trying to figure him out. "You got a name?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence. The girl blinked, as if surprised by the question. She hesitated, then spoke softly. "Zyra." Ryan nodded. "Zyra. That's a nice name." She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. "You? Human," she said, her voice uncertain, as if she wasn't sure if she was saying the right word. Ryan chuckled. "Yeah, I'm Ryan. And you? Not human." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I kinda figured that part." Zyra looked down at her hands. Her fingers were long, slightly slender, but not human-like. Her bluish skin had a faint shimmer to it, something Ryan hadn't noticed before. "What are you?" Ryan asked gently. She hesitated again. "From another world." Ryan leaned against the counter. He wasn't surprised, but hearing it directly from her felt different. "How'd you get here?" he asked. Zyra's hands tightened around the blanket. She didn't answer. Ryan noticed how her shoulders tensed, how her breathing grew uneven. Something had happened to her. Something bad. "You don't have to tell me," he said quickly, trying to ease her. "I just want to help you." Her golden eyes flickered up to him again. Ryan sighed, grabbing a bowl and pouring the hot soup into it. He walked over and handed it to her. "Here, eat." Zyra looked at the bowl, then back at him. She held it carefully, as if it was something precious. Then she took a small sip. Her eyes widened slightly, and she took another, then another, faster this time. Ryan watched as she ate, realizing something. She had been starving. Not just in the doghouse, but for a long time before that. Ryan clenched his fists. Who did this to her? A dangerous past. After she finished, Zyra set the bowl aside and looked at Ryan again. "You, kind." Ryan smirked. "I try." She hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Not all are kind." Ryan's smirk faded. He knew exactly what she meant. "Briggs," he muttered, his jaw tightening. "How did you end up with him?" Zyra hesitated before answering. "Taken. Sold." Ryan's stomach turned. He had a feeling that was the case, but hearing it confirmed made him sick. "Sold," he repeated. She nodded slowly. "People. Bad people. Take ones like me. Keep us. Use us." Ryan felt his blood boil. "So you were part of some kind of alien slave trade." She didn't answer directly, but her silence was enough. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "That explains why Briggs wanted you back so bad. He probably planned to sell you again." Zyra flinched at the thought. "Not happening," Ryan said firmly. "No one's taking you again. I promise." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You promise?" she asked, almost disbelieving. Ryan met her gaze. "Yeah, I do." For a long moment, Zyra just stared at him. Then slowly she nodded. "The hunters are coming." As the night stretched on, Ryan set up a small sleeping space for Zyra near the couch. He figured she needed rest more than anything. But he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Briggs, about what Zyra had been through, and about what would happen next. Ryan knew Briggs wouldn't just let this go. The man had connections. If Zyra was part of something bigger, a black market for stolen aliens, then Briggs wasn't the only danger. Others would come looking. Ryan clenched his jaw. He had just gotten himself into something way bigger than he expected. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let Zyra go back to that life. No matter what. Ryan barely slept that night. He sat on the old wooden chair near the window, his eyes scanning the dark forest outside. The cabin was hidden deep in the woods, far from town, but he knew it wasn't safe forever. Zyra was asleep on the couch, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her breathing was slow and steady, but every now and then she twitched, her fingers curling as if she was having a bad dream. Ryan clenched his jaw. She had been through too much, and now things were about to get worse. Briggs wouldn't just forget about this. The man had power, connections to dangerous people. If Zyra had been captured and sold once, it meant there were others out there who were still looking for her. And when they found out she was missing, they would come. Ryan checked his watch. Almost 5 a.m. The sun would rise soon. He stood up, stretching his tired muscles, then walked to the small kitchen to make coffee. He needed to think. How long could they stay here? Where could he take her? Zyra needed a way off Earth, a way to get back to wherever she came from. But how? Ryan wasn't exactly a space traveler. He barely had enough money to keep his old truck running. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Behind him, he heard Zyra stir. He turned around as she sat up, blinking sleepily. Her golden eyes were softer in the dim morning light, but when she saw Ryan, she tensed, just for a second, before relaxing again. "You're awake," Ryan said, forcing a small smile. "How are you feeling?" She hugged the blanket closer, looking around as if still trying to remember where she was. "Better," she said softly. Ryan leaned against the counter. "Good. You hungry?" Zyra hesitated, then nodded. Ryan grabbed some bread and peanut butter, the best he could offer for now, and set it on the table. Zyra studied the food for a moment before slowly picking up a piece and taking a bite. Ryan sat down across from her. "Listen, Zyra. We need to talk." She looked up. "Briggs won't stop looking for you," he continued. "And if he tells the wrong people that you're gone, we might have more than just him to worry about." Zyra's fingers tightened around the bread. She lowered her gaze. "I know," she whispered. Ryan frowned. "Do you know who might come after you?" She hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "They call themselves the Collectors." Ryan's stomach dropped. The name alone sounded bad. "Who are they?" he asked. Zyra's voice was barely above a whisper. "They hunt lost ones. Take them. Sell them." Ryan gritted his teeth. He had already guessed as much, but hearing it confirmed made his blood boil. "Briggs must be working with them," he muttered. Zyra nodded. "If they know I am here, they will come." Ryan took a deep breath. He had to move fast. They couldn't stay here anymore. But before he could say anything else, crack! A loud noise echoed through the woods outside. Zyra's eyes widened in fear. Ryan stood up instantly, grabbing the rifle he kept hidden under the couch. He didn't like using weapons, but right now he needed it. "Stay here," he told Zyra. She shook her head quickly. "No." Ryan hesitated. But before he could argue, another sound came. Footsteps. Multiple footsteps. Someone was out there. Ryan motioned for Zyra to stay low. He moved toward the window, peering through the glass. The forest was dark and still, but then he saw it. A shadow moving between the trees. Then another. Ryan's heartbeat sped up. This wasn't Briggs. This was something worse. "They found us," Zyra whispered. Ryan swallowed hard. He had to act now. "We're leaving," he said. Zyra stood up quickly. "Where?" Ryan didn't have an answer. But anywhere was better than here. "The chase begins." Ryan grabbed his truck keys and motioned for Zyra to follow. They slipped out the back door quietly, staying low and hidden. The truck was parked a few feet away, hidden between the trees. Ryan's grip on his rifle tightened as he scanned the darkness. Then, suddenly, a voice. "Find them. The girl is worth a fortune." Ryan's blood turned cold. Collectors. They were here. Zyra grabbed Ryan's sleeve, her breathing fast. "We have to go," she whispered. Ryan nodded. They ran. Ryan reached the truck first, pulling the door open for Zyra. She climbed in just as a flashlight beam swept across the trees, barely missing them. Ryan jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The sound shattered the silence. Shouts erupted from the forest. "There they are." Ryan didn't wait. He slammed his foot on the gas. The truck's tires spun on the dirt, kicking up dust as they tore out of the forest road. In the rearview mirror, Ryan saw them. Figures dressed in dark gear, moving fast, some of them pulling out weapons. A bullet whizzed past the truck, shattering a side mirror. Zara flinched, pressing herself against the seat. Ryan gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to let them take her. Not now. Not ever. He pressed harder on the gas, pushing the truck faster and faster, racing toward whatever came next. They were in the fight now. And Ryan wasn't backing down. Ryan's grip tightened on the steering wheel as the truck raced down the dark road. The tires kicked up dirt, the roar of the engine echoing through the forest. Zara sat beside him, her breath fast and uneven. She clutched the seatbelt tightly, her golden eyes filled with fear. In the rearview mirror, Ryan saw the headlights of another vehicle behind them. The collectors weren't giving up. A loud bang sounded, and something hit the back of the truck. "Are they shooting at us?" Ryan muttered. Zara flinched. "They will not stop." Ryan cursed under his breath. He didn't know how long his old truck could keep going. The road ahead was narrow and winding, surrounded by thick trees. If he made a wrong move, they could crash. "Hold on," he warned, gripping the wheel tightly. Zara braced herself as Ryan swerved sharply, taking a sudden turn onto a rough dirt path. The truck bounced, the suspension groaning under the impact. Behind them, the pursuing vehicle skidded but quickly recovered. "They're still coming," Zara cried. Ryan's mind raced. He needed to lose them. Then he spotted it, an old wooden bridge ahead, crossing a deep ravine. It was risky. The bridge looked unstable, and if it collapsed. But they had no choice. Ryan pushed the truck forward. The wooden planks groaned under the weight as they crossed, the truck shaking violently. Behind them, the collector's vehicle slowed for a moment, hesitating. Ryan saw his chance. He grabbed his rifle, rolled down the window, and took aim. "Keep your head down," he told Zara. She ducked just as Ryan fired a shot at the bridge's support beams. The old, weakened wood splintered and cracked. The moment the truck made it across, the bridge collapsed. Ryan slammed on the brakes, turning just in time to see the enemy's vehicle screech to a halt on the other side. The collectors jumped out, shouting in frustration. They were trapped. Ryan let out a deep breath, his hands shaking from the adrenaline. Zara slowly lifted her head. We got away." "For now," Ryan muttered. But he knew it wasn't over. The collectors would find another way. And next time, they would be ready. Nowhere left to run. Ryan parked the truck in a secluded clearing, deep in the forest. He killed the engine, listening carefully. No sounds of pursuit. No headlights in the distance. They were safe, for now. Zara sat in the passenger seat, still gripping the seatbelt. Her breathing was slowing down, but her hands trembled. "You okay?" Ryan asked, glancing at her. She nodded weakly. I thought they would take me." Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Not happening. I told you, I won't let them take you." Zara turned to him, her golden eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. "Why?" she asked softly. Ryan blinked. "What? Why? Help me." He hesitated. Why was he risking everything for her? Why had he stepped into something so dangerous when he could have just walked away? Maybe it was because he couldn't stand seeing someone treated like an object. Maybe it was because she deserved better. Ryan sighed. "Because it's the right thing to do." Zara studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand his words. Then, for the first time, she gave a small, hesitant smile. Ryan felt something in his chest tighten. "We can't stay here for long," he said, breaking the silence. "The collectors won't give up. We need a plan." Zara's smile faded. "They will keep coming." "Yeah," Ryan muttered. "And we need to be ready. A plan to fight back." Ryan checked the truck's supplies. They had food, water, and a few weapons. But it wouldn't be enough against an entire group of trained hunters. We need to find help, Ryan said. Someone who knows how to fight these guys. Zyra's expression darkened. No one will fight them. They are feared. Ryan clenched his fists. Then we fight them ourselves. She looked at him in surprise. You would fight them. Ryan smirked. I don't like bullies. Zyra's eyes flickered with something. Determination. For the first time, she wasn't just a scared runaway. She was someone ready to fight for her freedom. Ryan grabbed a map from the truck and spread it out. There's an old military bunker nearby, he said. If we can reach it, we can hold out there. Maybe even send a signal to your people. Zyra's eyes widened. A signal? Ryan nodded. If we can reach someone from your world, maybe they can help. Zyra hesitated, then slowly nodded. Then we go, she said. Ryan smiled. That's the spirit. But deep down, he knew. The hardest battle was still ahead, and he had just declared war on the collectors. Ryan gripped the steering wheel as the truck rumbled along the rough forest road. The night air was cool, and the trees stretched endlessly around them, shadows flickering under the headlights. Zyra sat beside him, her golden eyes scanning the surroundings. The military bunker Ryan mentioned was still a few miles away. If they could reach it, they could regroup, rest, and figure out their next move. But Ryan knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over yet. We're almost there, he muttered, more to himself than to Zyra. She nodded but stayed silent. She had been quiet since they escaped the collectors. Maybe she was still processing everything. Maybe she was wondering what came next. Ryan understood. Neither of them had all the answers. But one thing was certain. Zyra was free now, and he was going to make sure she stayed that way. The bunker. After another 20 minutes of careful driving, Ryan finally spotted what he was looking for, a hidden entrance covered in thick vines. This is it, he said, stopping the truck. He climbed out, brushing the vines aside to reveal a steel door embedded into the rock. It looked old, but it was built to last. Zyra stepped out, staring at it. This was made by your people. Ryan smirked. Yeah. Back in the day, the military built secret places like this in case of war. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small keycard he had found years ago when he first stumbled upon this place. He wasn't sure if it would still work, but it was worth a try. He swiped the card. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft peep. With a heavy clunk, the steel door unlocked. Ryan grinned. We're in. He pushed the door open and led Zyra inside. The bunker was small but sturdy. Dust covered the old metal walls, but it had everything they needed. A generator, storage rooms, and even a radio system. Zyra walked around slowly, her fingers brushing against the metal. It is safe. Ryan nodded. Yeah. No one knows about this place. We can stay here for now. For the first time, Zyra looked relieved. A way home. As Ryan set up a few lights and checked the bunker's systems, Zyra sat by the radio. If this works, Ryan said, adjusting the dials, we might be able to send a message. Maybe someone from your world is listening. Zyra hesitated. What? If no one comes? Ryan glanced at her. She looked uncertain, almost as if she wasn't sure if she wanted to be found. Ryan sighed. Then we figure something else out. He flicked a switch, and the radio crackled to life. Static filled the room. Zyra leaned forward, listening closely as Ryan tried different frequencies. Then, a faint voice came through. Zyra's eyes widened. Did you hear that? Ryan asked. She nodded quickly. Try again. Ryan adjusted the settings, speaking into the mic. This is Ryan Carter. If anyone can hear me, we need help. There's someone here, Bo. A voice interrupted him. Repeat that. Identify yourself. Zyra gasped. That is my language. Ryan handed her the mic. Go ahead. Zyra took a deep breath and spoke in her native tongue. Her words were fast, desperate. Whoever was on the other end was listening. After a pause, the voice responded. Zyra's eyes filled with shock. "What?" Ryan asked. She turned to him, her voice trembling. "They are coming." Ryan's chest tightened. "Who? Your people?" She nodded slowly. "But they say the collectors will come too." Ryan's stomach dropped. It wasn't over. The final fight was coming. The last battle. Ryan checked his rifle, loading a fresh round. Zyra watched him, her expression unreadable. "You don't have to fight," she said softly. Ryan smirked. "You kidding? I'm not letting those guys take you back." Zyra's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she stood beside him. "I will fight too." Ryan stared at her. She was no longer the scared girl in a doghouse. She was strong now, determined. Ryan nodded. "Then let's finish this." They took their positions, waiting. Minutes passed. Then, the sound of approaching vehicles. Ryan's grip tightened. It was time. A new future. The fight that followed was brutal. Ryan and Zyra fought side by side, using the bunker's defenses to hold off the collectors. Just when it seemed like they couldn't last, Zyra's people arrived. The battle was over quickly after that. The collectors had no chance. As the dust settled, Zyra stood among her people, looking at Ryan. "You are free now," Ryan said, trying to ignore the strange feeling in his chest. "You can go home." Zyra hesitated. Then she did something Ryan didn't expect. She stepped forward and placed a hand on his chest. "My home is here," she said. Ryan's breath caught. "Zyra." She smiled softly. "You saved me. I do not wish to leave." Ryan looked into her golden eyes and knew she meant it. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't want her to leave either. With a deep breath, Ryan nodded. "Then stay."